It's my first ever sponsor talk, actually, and I'm quite excited. What I'm going to talk about today is a tool we've built, and I want to show how and why it's useful for us as developers. And to start, I want to just have a brief look on what our developer tools landscape look like today. And so I start with this tweet that it's not really very important. It's just one reply to a thread. It's out of context, but he says all he needs is a terminal, a browser, and an IDE. So he's a coder, and he says that's what he needs, right? And I think that's true for many of us. And so I want to look at what we are doing all day as developers and where we are doing it. And it seems like we do a lot of things in the browser. For instance, we do the bug tracking stuff in the browser for years already, right? That has been always a web application. When we want to solve a problem, of course, we Google it, we search for solutions, or we see whether there is already an NPM library or some other library out there that we could reuse that solves our problem. We do that in the browser. We do all the communications mainly in browser. Some of you might still have a desktop mail client. I can just recommend to switch to a cloud-based, because then you can search your 10 years spam inbox, so to say. Really, it works. Other communications that happens, actually what I do when I start working on the day is not, usually I would open the mail inbox first, but now I use GitHub notifications first, so I check that. So that has also changed a bit. Yeah, working with your colleagues, communicating through Hangouts or Slack or Gitter or Mattermost, and there are desktop clients for those tools, but they are essentially all browser applications, right? They run on Electron or so, but usually, I mean, you benefit from this kind of accessibility that the browser provides here as well. Code reviews, you do, of course, also in the browser. There are quite an array of good tools now. GitHub, GitLab, and Bitbucket have it integrated into a bigger thing. And Gerrit is specifically for code reviews. I guess everyone does code reviews, or at least, yeah. Does someone not know what a code review is? I would just briefly explain it. No, that's good. And then, of course, we hang around also, and we usually use the browser. At least in our team, no one has any games on their machines or so. And I mean, you can even play games in browsers. So why do I have this powerful desktop machine where I can run all these applications and so on if I do everything in the browser? As a developer, there is one thing I do also, and I do it a lot of times, that is writing code, debugging, searching code, and so on. You know, and I do that. Well, me personally, not so much anymore, but usually we do that on the desktop for several reasons. I think the biggest reason is that for a specific project, we need a large array of specific tools. We want to have specific editors, IDEs with some plugins in for the languages we use there. But also we need to install command line tools for the runtime and so on. What we do basically every time is we kind of mimic the production environment that the code we are working on should kind of eventually run it, try to get quite close to it, right, somehow. And this is can be really annoying. So I mean, I think you can just read that yourself. It's a Dilbert comic. It's supposed to be funny, but it is not, because it's just true, right? I mean, there's nothing funny about it. 3 days is a good average, I would say, to set up a project. But it really represents what the state is of this problem. And there are others who think, yeah, they see it the same way. There's JetBrains. There's a quote from the JetBrains.com website saying that newly hired developers spend up to 70% of their initial work time getting up to speed with an existing code base. And that's, of course, worse if you have multiple projects, which we all have, because we are all going towards microservice architectures with lots of different languages being used and loosely coupled things and so on. And so what we have there for every project, we have these, in many cases, informal way of describing in the README what you need in order to run and work on your project. And then when you're new to a project, what you typically do first day is, yeah, you read that, you check that out, and then you do it, and then something doesn't work, of course, and you ask your colleague, and you sit together, and half a year ago it worked, but now not, because some versions have changed, and so on. And eventually, you are able to make it run somehow, right? You have your setup for that project. And you can start working, and you push something, and then you ask for a code review, and then your colleague says, it doesn't work, and then you say, well, it works on my machine, right? You have this issue. And that's, of course, also something that is derived from the fact that we have this informal ways of specifying what a project is and so on. So that's one part I want to focus on today. The other is that I have changed how I work as a developer since I use these platforms, these code hosting platforms. I use GitHub most of the time. And there is even something called the GitHub flow that is a description of a workflow that you can have when you work at GitHub. It goes like, first thing you do is you go to an issue, you assign it yourself, then you go locally, you have the setup going somehow, and you check out a local branch, do the changes, push it, you go back to GitHub, you create a PR, you ask for a colleague, the colleague needs to check out your code, test it, and so on, then goes back to GitHub, does commenting in line, and so on. So that's the flow, and what happens there in this flow is that you have these transitions many times, especially if you do trunk-based development, where you have very small incremental changes, which is recommended way if you want to continuously deliver. So how can we improve that? We thought, like, we were working on a cloud IDE for a year now, and I did that every day, right? I look at issues and projects, I do code reviews and so on. Wouldn't it be cool if I just had a button that gives me, like, that captures the context I'm at and gives me a working environment that I can just start working with? So that's what we built. So if you have this, it's a browser extension you can install. It does nothing more than adding this button to all GitHub pages, and soon also GitLab and Bitbucket. And when you click it, it just takes the context, understands, oh, you are on an issue. OK, let's check out the default branch. That's the start. And then we check out a local branch. You can start working on it. You have a full-blown IDE. And so actually, if you have not seen that, it is EclipseCon, so it's open source, Eclipse project. It targets desktop and browser application IDEs. So we, the idea is that it's you can build like traditional Eclipse RCP applications with that using web technologies, but you can also run it in cloud context, for instance, with EclipseJ. It's based on VS Code's code editor, Monaco, and right, it's open source, and it's an effort driven by different parties. So there's us, TypeFox, then there is Ericsson, and then Red Hat. They are contributing heavily to it. IBM using it already, having some small contributions, and there are more coming. Also lots of individuals. So it's really going well, this project. And that's the basis for what you just saw with the Git pod button. So what I did is I created this issue on a project that is a Next.js example Hello World project. Next.js is a new JavaScript web application framework. If you don't know, could be. It's based on React. It renders server-side. So there are some solutions, JSFiddle, something like that, that allow you to sketch stuff in the browser, right? But as soon as you need a real platform, those don't work anymore. What you have here is a full Docker container, even with root access here. And I have checked out the right state. And here on the left, it's very small. You see it checked out a branch GH5. So it uses the issue number, names the local branch like that. And what I can do now is start a dev server. I call yarn dev, and it opens, it tells me there's a port open from that cloud workspace, and I see the application running. So it just says hello from Gitpod. And this is just running in the browser. I didn't install anything on my machine, right? It's really only, everything is in the cloud here. So now I can start changing it. So I use quick command palette to open the file. And you see this is a TypeScript file using TSX, like this is inline HTML to simplify it. You see we have diagnostics and code completion, all these things. And that's another reason why we thought we could build another IDE, because, I mean, usually you would say, well, build yet another IDE, maybe not a good option or a good idea, because building Eclipse has taken so many years, so many engineers' lives, I would say, and the same for JetBrains IDEs and so on. So how could you dare doing the same thing? We would not. It's not the same thing, because we rely on bigger building blocks that are available today. So one is the language server protocol, which solves a very, very nice or a bad problem, actually, in a nice way. So you know there are many programming languages out there, and we have maybe 20 mainstream languages, but then there are many, many more, and you usually use more than one, and so on. And what we did at Eclipse in the past is, you want to have tool support, no problem. I will build a plugin. That means I will create another parser for that language, because you need a parser in order to smart editing support, to have smart editing support. Type checker, linter. Basically, the better the language support should be, the more the thing you build looks like a full-blown compiler. And I mean, the Java people knew that from the first day, so they just started off with a Java compiler in EclipseJDT. For others, if you look at JetBrains, for instance, it's not a full-blown compiler, but if you look at the code, it's quite massive what they have there. And it's even worse when you have to write that in Java for a different language, like take CDT, right? There is a lot of C, C++ stuff being written in Java, again. And it's super hard to catch up with all the changes that C++ has. And I think, I don't know, CDT is at, what version is it? 9 or 13, I'm not sure. But we have, yeah, there is quite a huge gap it has to catch up with. So that kind of works, but the thing is, if you look outside Eclipse, there are other editors as well. And they all did the same thing, more or less. And then we have a lot of re-implementations of the compilers, right? And so the idea coming from the VS Code people, the same group, by the way, that also started the Eclipse IDE, that is, we put a common protocol in the middle, and then we have the IDEs and the languages on each side, and we just plug it together. And that's what the language server protocol is. And it has a lot of backup from all kinds of industries and languages and so on. So this is the current list. I think it's 2 weeks old or so. You see a lot of also mainstream languages. Go was there. We have also Groovy or Java, of course. Java language server, by the way, is just wrapping EclipseJDT, more or less. So that's also a way how we can move our Eclipse sources to the next, I would say, platforms. So you see, and there's even stuff like, you see here, there's Vue, which is a framework, it's not a language. So language server protocol is not entirely focused on only languages, but in general editing support, and you can have multiple language servers for the same file running in parallel. And then there's other things like the debug adapter protocol, which is the same idea just for debuggers. And if you take that, the language server protocol, debug adapter protocol, and also that VS Code provides a really, really rich editing widget, then building an IDE out of that is still a lot of work. And we've been working with a bigger team, like now we are around 15 people working full-time on that, with lots of people from Red Hat, Ericsson, and TypeFox for 1 year. So it's still work, but it's dramatically reduced. Okay, back to our example. So what I should do here to fix the issue is change the color, make it a bit more colorful. So I choose purple, also increase the font size a bit. I save, the dev server spins and shows me the update. So that's a quite nice experience, development experience you have there. I'm happy with my change now, so I need to commit it. I go to the Git view. I can preview my changes in diff editor. I can stage them. You see the comment already has something like fixes #5, which is the GitHub way of being sure the issue gets auto-closed when you merge it into the default branch. So Gitpod understands that, proposes that to you. The only thing you need now is create a pull request. So usually you would go back to GitHub and create a pull request, but this is fortunately integrated here in the IDE. So we commit, push the branch, and on the right side there is a pull request view where we can just create a pull request. Right. So that's my part of the flow. Now I ask my friend Anton to do a code review. So he looks at the PR page now, not the issue page, right? And when he clicks the Gitpod button, he will get a different perspective, so to say. We don't really have perspectives in Thea, but the context, the Gitpod context knows it's a code review, so it shows all the file changes on the left and opens the first editor, and then you can even just use the cursor key to go through all the individual changes. That's quite nice already, but of course we are in the IDE, so we can just code a bit. So let's change the color here to something else, like green, for instance, save. So the dev server is automatically started. And now you see also this icon there, which it suggests that you can comment in line. So Anton seems to like green better, so he comments that, and then he still approves the review. So the pull request view is now filled with the pull request because he is in the context of a pull request. He just approves it, submits it, and all the changes get synced automatically to GitHub in both directions. So that's really like, there's zero transition stuff between this. I want to do something on GitHub, and I go and you click, and you can do it, what you're up to. So how does Gitpod know what kind of workspace you need? There are 3 levels it checks. So the first thing is there is something called the .gitpod file. You might have seen .travis file or something like that. So it configures for you, for instance, the Docker container and so on. I will go into the details in a second slide. But it tries to find this Gitpod file, which contains all the configuration. The first thing it does is, of course, it looks at the root of your checked out state. So if you look at an old branch, it will check that. If you look at master, it checks master. If it doesn't find something there is a central public repository where everyone can contribute Gitpod files to. So in case you want to have something for React, but you don't have write access to React, or you cannot agree to check that in, then you can push it there. And everyone will benefit from the configuration, from the shared configuration. And the third, if there is also nothing for your project, which is often the case at the moment, then we will infer the Gitpod configuration. So we look at the project, we check, oh, there is a Maven file. Okay, probably you need Maven. Probably you want to also run Maven clean install to begin with, and such things. And what you configure with a Gitpod file is first the Docker image. So you have control of what tools you need. If you don't provide it, we have a very feature-rich standard image that comes with Node and Java in a the stable new version, so to say, and lots of tools, really nice shell that is configured for you. If you don't like that, you can have your own image and add tools to that. You have to specify what ports are exposed. So you saw that I started the Steph server, it runs on 3000, so I need to tell, like, please export 3000. And also, if you want to do remote debugging and so on, you need to expose those ports. Then you can specify what scripts should be started when you first start the container. That's quite cool if you, for instance, sometimes I have to review 2 or 3 PRs at the same time. And I just start them, all 3, and then they all run the build already for me. And then I can later go and have an already good state, so to say. And then you will be able to provide what Thea setup you need. So currently it's one IDE that is pre-configured with like the most important main programming languages that we are targeting at the moment, which is Java, Python, TypeScript, and or some others like JSON, HTML, and so on. But in future, you will be able to say, okay, I need PHP or I need Go, and so on. Right. So then I showed you that there is this button, and it's done by a browser extension. I mentioned that already. We have that for Chrome and Firefox. But what it does really is quite simple. It just uses the URL you have there and prefixes it with gitpod.io hash. And you can do that manually. You don't need to install a browser extension if you want to try it out. Just go to any GitHub repo and type it in. Currently, it's private beta, so it won't work if you're not invited in the private beta. I will give you details to that. But yeah, that's the idea. If you just want to, or if you want to provide it to someone else, say like I've prepared something here for you, and you can just give them the link, and then they can click on it, and they have the workspace. Yeah, so it's a service. So it's called, it's on gitpod.io. It's currently in private beta, as I said. Afterwards, there will be probably a phase of public beta where it's free, and afterwards it will still be free. But then there will also be paid subscription models where you can have additional hours. Because what happens when we start a workspace, it's not using your local CPUs. I mean, only the front end, but the back end, all the builds and so on, running in a cloud, right? In our case, it's Google Cloud. So that costs a bit. So we need, at some point, we need to restrict it, so to say. The current idea is it's free for 10 gigabyte hours a month, and it will renew then. And we also want to think about, like, you can earn gigabyte hours by doing pull requests to open source projects and these kind of things. But if you need more hours, then you need a paid subscription. And then it's just a Kubernetes application, so we can install it on any Kubernetes cluster. So of course, if you have something like GitHub Enterprise in your intranet, you can also install Gitpod Enterprise in your internet, connected to that, and then we can reconfigure it. That will be self-hosted, and of course, TypeFox, we do tools for many, many years, actually, and so we are happy to help with custom integrations with Jira or whatnot, and also custom extensions for Thea. And if you want to try the Gitpod Enterprise stuff, for the first month, it will definitely be free until you are happy with the experience. And to be honest, we don't really know about the pricing model. We will have to talk about that. But we will soon know, actually. Good. Yeah, that's it. Do you have questions? Yeah.
What's the difference between Gitpod and the Koehnlein of
Nice question. No, actually, we eliminated everything between your code, or no, what you want to do and the code, starting code. So there is nothing like a workspace configuration thing. You don't need to configure workspaces and so on. There are many, it's for sure there are many things that are coming also from Code&V, from EclipseJ, also from Eclipse Classic, also from IntelliJ IDEA, VS Code obviously. So there are many ideas we put together and into this thing. Yeah, that's for sure. And there is factory, you are talking about the factory links, I guess, right? Yeah, yeah. That's similar to the URIs.
So I see how you can usually test the application in your TIA instance, either if it's in web, because you have this URL and you can connect a container to the port, or if it's in console, if it's in the console, because the terminal is open in your web browser, so it's a console application. What about rich client applications that are either web or based?
Okay, the question is, what about rich client applications, or what if my application needs a real native graphical user interface? There will be a solution to that. There are solutions to that. We have not integrated that, but we basically can stream the rendered UI to your browser. Yeah. Yeah. Then we will infer one, or like compute one, based on what we see in the project. Yeah.
What kind of load do you typically see on running these projects and tests and whatever else?
What load?
What kind of load do you see?
It depends on what you're running there mostly. So the service that is there now is the TIA backend that is not doing a lot as long as you don't use it. But once, for instance, you start coding in Java on a huge project, we are starting a Java language server that does more or less the same that Eclipse JDT does, so indexing the whole workspace, and then you have some load there. So it really depends on what you're executing. But that's another thing, of course, with cloud computing, you can scale out if you need it. So if you are working on data science stuff, for instance, and you need 64 gigabyte, no problem. Cool. Thank you.